Hello, and welcome to Overcoming Humanity. Um, I wrote a blog. I've been working on it for about a month now. It's called What's Your Channel, which is the new graphic I have on my Instagram and Facebook account. Anyway, I originally wrote it as a script for this, and decided to come back and read it so that you might hear it. And this is, we'll hear it from my own voice. So here you go. What's your channel? A year and a half ago, when I began practicing Reiki, I learned to draw the symbols from a template. Later on, when I was using the symbols by drawing them with my fingers, I noticed a crack in my imagined drawing, and the power of the symbol flickered. It wasn't diminished. It was as effective as ever, and sometimes even more. Recently, I noticed different variations in the way people draw symbols, sometimes not even close to the original format. That's how I learned to draw the symbols, from a format not in its traditional form. I still channel Reiki easily and effortlessly, despite the realization that I never drew the symbols correctly, and this led me to ponder the nature of Reiki and universal energy in itself. I read that Dr. Yusai chose people who were uneducated to teach the practice of Reiki because he recognized their healing potential, not for their ability to perfectly mimic every flick of the wrist, as it were, but for their ability to connect with source energy and channel healing. So the question then became, are the symbols anything more than a training tool to channel Reiki? It was brought to my attention that the symbols are slightly different in each style of Reiki, and also where you find your information. Reiki is energy. It's not a head trip. We don't need to miss the flow of universal energy due to not feeling as if we hit the symbol line work properly. Even more so, it's quite apparent that Reiki is true like a river with its geometry's energy flow, and it's easy to prove in a 3D reality. Look at the wonderful geometry encapsulated in architecture. People are either drawn to it or repelled by it, and its will is expressed by the fact that you cannot unsee the geometry and energetic influence a structure has, regardless to your own will. This is demonstrated in every form of art, also through nature, which serves as the ultimate form of medium to convey truth through our perceptual lens of consciousness and converted into abstract lesson. The geometry of all things shapes our view of reality. If you take the time to look at a masterpiece, you're under its influence. Great masters of art are expressions of this great will of Reiki, or whatever word you choose to describe it. Language serves for each culture to convey the message. Look across the board, different words, same truth. The geometry is the same no matter where you go. It has an influence in this three-dimensional space, regardless to people's will and language. For instance, a mountain is a natural geometry which demands some kind of reaction from a distance, ranging from the most passive view of I'll plot a course around it to the most ambitious I'm going to view the world from the top of it. Geometry is a consciousness of its own. We obey it whether we recognize it as such or not. The shape of life has an effect on us, changing us, but not necessarily by our own will. Whether we recognize nature's geometric potency or not, the physical effects are still apparent through observation of the body, such as muscle gain, sore feet, and so on and so forth. Our personal understanding of life leads us to feelings of empowerment by climbing over the rock, or feeling of defeat when laying at the foot of the rock after falling from it, and then again feelings of personal strength when we get up after falling off the rock. Now we are funny. All these things occurred as a result of the geometry. Reiki has its own consciousness, and we are a conduit to its energetic force by passively or actively using it. It's not a requirement to openly invite Reiki and channel it through, just as it's not a requirement to pray to any specific God in order to receive guidance through the power of prayer, just as it's not a requirement to climb the mountain. This is evident by the fact that benefit can be derived from a devout state, regardless to the modality or practice, or if you prefer spiritual structure. It was going to act with or without us, but in my personal view, the healing it provides to people can be sped up. The more open we are to it, the more we are able to channel it, the more healing can take place. Energy has the blueprints up for the geometry encoded within, and people work with whatever language or cultural understanding and build in accordance to their ability to channel an idea. And this is encapsulated in the energy. So what I'm proposing here is that we open ourselves more to love, more to working with Reiki, the natural state of the universe, and forward its progression more rapidly, that we may bring more benefit from its healing. In any case, there's no need to worry over it. The universal energies that are playing now and influencing everything in existence were here in the days of our ancestors as they are today. I thank you for allowing me to share. Reiki is one of my favorite channels. What's yours? And there's plenty of reasons to love Reiki. For me personally, it's helped me to work through a lot of different traumas that I've had in my life in order to open up enough so that I could have this moment with you. Before this, for quite a long time, I couldn't open up. I wasn't open in really any shape or form, just enough to maintain a small family and maybe help a couple people outside of my home. But as a result of practicing Reiki and working with the thoughts that come along with Reiki, it feels like my heart's open again. And I haven't felt this open maybe in my entire life, maybe since I was a small child. I'm not really sure when, but I can see the benefits of being with this line of thinking. This culture has so many benefits to it. And as I wrote in my blog, it's not really a conscious choice whether you act with it or not, because the will of the environment is affecting us with each step. I mean, when I walk through the door, the geometry here that's in play, the ones that we've created as a man-made structure, I have to submit to that. I can't walk through the door without turning the handle first, or using the key. And each iteration of geometry gives us more things to work through, work around. But when you go to places, and this is a great example of people who have mastery over universal principles, when you go to places that have ancient geometries, when you stand in their presence, when you look at them, they alter how you think from day to day, because looking at this geometry, which is, it's a simple house, and I have my thoughts about how to improve it, or, what about it, and I live here, so I see things where it could be improved, whereas other people might walk in and go, this is a nice place, I could see coming here more often. Or if your house is a total mess, and people might walk into your house and go, well, I wouldn't want to live there. It has its effects. They're a promise that you're going to be interacting with the environment if you have any kind of sensory perception whatsoever. But when you go to a place that's incredibly well designed, like from where I live, you could go to James Madison University and you can see the work of people who had very fine thoughts. In the city that it is in, they had time to think about what they wanted to accomplish. There were specific goals when they were creating the geometries. These guys that create geometries like this, and this is still not the top of the chain, of course, but it's a good example of good geometries, because when you walk on campus, you see everywhere it was laid out with a specific thought in mind. The sidewalk that was going to get you to this specific class, the buildings were spaced apart a certain amount. When they zoned the town or the city, they had the streets so wide, so that it could accommodate future traffic, because they saw growth before they ever laid a brick. And this is my point. These people that have the ability to tap into universal abstract thought, they create things that are megalithic. They create things that are beyond the comprehension of the normal person. The normal person gets bored with looking at it and goes on with their life and thinks, well, it's a brick, but I personally have spent time looking at different things, different architectures, and I'm just like, man, they really had to have a fine thought. Example of being, there's a house in this town that I live in that was built 100 and whatever years ago, and they have a dental mold on it. And then when I start to reflect what it actually took as far as effort and materials in order to create a dental mold at that time required specific trade. It required mathematical precision, which in order to have tools in that era that would create just the math for it, took a really fine and well-educated mind, or at least, somebody that was tapped in. But this is my point. When they laid those first bricks at James Madison, they didn't have all the tools and technological advances that we did, but they still had one thing in common with people that have a desire to be tapped into a higher mind state. And that is, they could, and they could see it, and then they allowed themselves to live in it. And then as they lived in this thought, they kept on modifying and adjusting it until they had a good enough construct where they created a whole campus worth of buildings, and not just campus worth of buildings, but they created a whole city worth of streets that are well designed, and it shows a very, very high state of consciousness. But this is a smaller example. If you were going to say the Vatican, I'm sure every brick was laid in mentally before they actually came to a place. And the people that seem to really tap into architecture and engineering are not scientists generally. They do the work too. They have their part. But the people that do fantastic works of art, they encode geometries into everything that they do. The most beautiful works of art are ones that you look upon and they make you feel something. You don't really necessarily have an idea what it was, but you get a certain feeling, and that information is passed through to another person in order to preserve the abstract thought that was happening, which is geometries at play, which is universal consciousness at play. And there's just tremendous things that are lying underneath of masters of art. And then you have people like a Tesla who, he just pulled device after device out of his mind, tapped in, and they were all crazy beyond his time. But what I'm proposing here is that all information is here right now in every second of our lives, and all we need to do is to be able to tap into it, is to find that space in order to do that. There are entities, as it were, or social constructs of higher dimensions that pass on information through light. Light has information encoded into it. So just being here, you're tapping into it. And now I'm looking for more ways to step into it. And what I'm saying is that Reiki, because of its nature, as an energy, as a modality of healing, is like tapping into the positive aspect of this. And I think it's so good as a modality, because it does just like every other modality does, except for in a more passive way, but it ends up having such a large impact just by expressing a few words, invoking its power. In any case, I was told, or I've heard, that if you wanted to see how a person's doing, allow them to build something and then try to walk through their geometry, and you can enter their state of mind. And this is how you look inside of another person's mind, what they produce in physical reality. And then you can get a sense of what their natural polarity is, and maybe what they're thinking about, perhaps. But the longer that you stay inside of it, the more it affects you, whether you actually consciously recognize this or not. Anyway, these are some of the things that have been passing through my mind, and this article, even though it's a short article that I wrote, these are the ideas that I'm portraying. And a lot of it doesn't come from me. It's something that I tapped into a few years back, and it's been with me the entire time. I just didn't recognize it until recently. So there you go. I thank you for taking a moment to listen to me and allowing me to express myself. And I hope you enjoyed this, and if it's some benefit to you, I'm more than pleased. If you want to talk about it, you can put it in the comments. Um, I'm Jeff. I represent the brand Overcoming Humanity, which is more of a channeled kind of a name that I received from a higher entity. And I appreciate you stopping by and listening. And I hope this helps. And you take what you like from it, and the rest of it you can just, you know, as it is, as you were. Thank you.